In this video clip, I would like to briefly go over the following two things that look similar in the names. So they are the so-called moderation and the mediation effects. The moderation and the mediation effect are similar in their names, but these two are actually very different things. A moderation effect describes the scenario in which the effect of X on Y is dependent on another factor, and we will call this factor as a moderator. The focus of the mediation effect is somewhat different, and it is more about a mechanism through which the variable X is going to affect variable Y. So if the influence of X on Y is not fully a direct impact, but it is totally or partially channeled through another variable of Q, then we will call it as a mediation effect. And the Q here is the so-called mediator. Perhaps the definitions of moderation and mediation effects are equally confusing as same as their similar names. So I will here give some intuitive examples for you to understand what are they and what are the strategies that we can use to estimate the moderation and the mediation effects. And let's first look at the moderation effect. Basically, it argues that the variable X has an effect on Y, but up to the different levels of the moderator P, the size of the effect can be different. So we can consider, for instance, the variable X here is the quantity of the food you eat, and the variable Y is how fat you would be. In between the food and the fat in your body, there is a thing called your digestion system. That is, if you have a great stomach, you can fully capture the nutritions inside the food. But if you have instead a great stomachache, then many of the nutrition elements in your food will just get in and then get out. Therefore, even when two persons are eating a same quantity of food, the one with a better digestion system is more likely to be fatter. To estimate the moderation effect, we can use the so-called interaction term in a regression. So here you see that I include the multiplication of food times the quality of your digestion system. And here the hypothesis is that the effect of food on your weight is dependent on how good your digestion system is. By taking the derivative of this regression equation with respect to the variable of food, we are able to derive the so-called marginal effect, and it represents the ability of food in making you fatter given a particular level of the quality in your digestion system. So if we have a beta 3 that is significantly positive, we will have an upward sloping marginal effect curve, and that confirms our hypothesis that if you have a better digestion system, you are more likely to be fatter even when you just eat a same quantity of food like your friends. And by the way, we should also pay a small attention here. That is, technically, if you will use an interaction term in the regression, you should also include all the variables inside the interaction and use them as the control variables. So here, for instance, in this regression, you should not forget the variable dig, which is about the quality of the digestion system itself. In the example of the previous slide, the moderator is a continuous variable. But in some cases, you would also see moderators in a categorical variable. So that is, instead of a continuous scale from 0 to 100 describing how great is your stomach, we just have 3 categories, which indicates whether your digestion system is great, normal, or bad. If this is the case, we can still use the strategy of interactions, but the format is a bit different, and you will have the interaction of food with 3 dummy variables, and the 3 dummies indicating which type of digestion system you have. For instance, you have a great digestion system, and if this is the case, then the variable dig great will be 1, and the other 2 dummies are 0. And effectively only beta 3 counts in the regression about you. Vice versa, if another person has an average digestion system, then only beta 4 matters for him. Therefore, by including the interaction with the dummies, effectively we are allowed to have a different slope for the persons with a different category of digestion system. We can also have a plot for the sake of visualization, and this time it's not the marginal effect curve as in the previous slide, but it is just about the value of the 3 betas, which represent the effects of food on your weight if your digestion system is bad, normal, or great. And now let's look at the mediation effect. Mediation is more about the functioning mechanism that how the variable x is able to affect y, and whether there is a middleman q in between that played a key role in the link of causality. It can be a partial mediation, which means that the variable x still has some direct impact on y, but sometimes it can be also the case that the effect is fully due to the mediator q. An intuitive example about a full mediation is the role of vaccination in fighting diseases. Vaccine is not an antibiotic, and it will not be able to kill the virus directly. However, it will trigger some reactions in your own immune system. So the white cells in your blood are going to create the so-called antibodies, and the antibodies will kill the virus and protect you from the infection. So in the end, your immunity against this virus comes totally from the ability of your white cells in creating the antibodies, but it is not the vaccination itself. Assume that you got this disease before and you have recovered, but you still have enough level of antibodies in your blood. Then even without the vaccination, you are still immune to this disease. But on the other hand, if you have some troubles with your own immune system, such that the white cells in your blood are unable to generate enough antibodies after the vaccination, then even with the vaccine injection, you will still be vulnerable to the virus and you will get infected. So in this case, we have a full mediation. That is, the effect of vaccination is fully or totally channeled through the mediator of antibodies. The empirical estimation of a mediation effect is very different from the moderation. It is not tested through the interaction terms, but we normally need to perform multiple regressions in order to check the mediation effect. The idea behind the test of mediation is that the most important element affecting y is the mediator q, and it is not the variable x itself. When we only include variable x in the regression, then the beta 1 you obtain captures also the indirect mediation effect due to q. But when we explicitly include also the mediator q in the regression, then the beta 1 you obtain from the second regression equation will no longer have the mediation effect. Therefore, we can compare the coefficients from the two regressions. If we find, say, the beta 1 appears to be similar in both regressions, then there is no signal for the mediation effect. But if you have a significantly positive beta 1 in the first equation, and in the second one it becomes insignificant, or the value has a large decline, then we can say there is a possibility related with a total or a partial mediation effect. But of course, before making a final conclusion, you should also check whether you can establish a causal relationship between x and the mediator q. So here you see a website, and it has a very good explanations on the steps that you can follow in testing the mediation effect.